think. Yep. All right. Confirmed live. Chat room should be working. Test. I don't see any early birds in there. Okay. All right. This is going to be great. I'm excited. Oh, Kristina, I forgot your title. Can you give me your title real quick at the company?
Yeah, VP of Product.
VP of Product. Okay.
I also call her EP a lot, so if I say that, that's why.
Yeah, that's fine. It's all good.
We all wear a lot of hats.
Yeah, this is the multi-hat phase of the company, right? Everybody's got it.
Oh my God. Ed does everything. He's like our IT person, UX. He's done a lot of systems design. It's crazy.
That's great. He'll need a break at some point.
John does a lot too.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like John's got his hand in every cookie jar there is. All right, there we go. There's Mac Addict, Evan Dreamer. You guys can see us. Wonderful. All right, cool. I think we're ready to kick it off. We are. Oh, perfect timing. Look at that. The clock just rolled over. Make sure our theme is ready to rock. It is. All right, you guys. This is it. Let's go.
It's go time.
It's go time. And it begins in 3, 2, 1.
Fantastic Pixel Castle and Frog Pants Studios presents Word on the Street with Greg Street and Scott Johnson.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Word on the Street. As you heard right there, it is Greg Street and Scott Johnson. Greg, welcome back. How are you, sir?
Good. I'm good.
Yeah.
Excited to be here as always.
Good to see you, man. We are at 12 episodes of this, which means a year of Word on the Street. Does it feel like a year to you?
We are catching up with the instance.
Yeah, you'll be there in no time.
No, it doesn't feel like we've done 12 of these already. It feels like we've done about 4.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what that means.
Yeah, and since we only do it monthly, it's just crazy how quick 12 went. I'm kind of blown away that we've had 12 of these. And congrats on that, but also I just have this quick question before we dive in and get our guest in here. How are you feeling this far in? We're a little more than a year for the company, and about a year for the podcast. How are you feeling at this stage? Are you feeling like things are progressing the way Greg Street envisioned it would?
I'm scared the team will hear this, but I feel like we're actually a little ahead of schedule. I think the results of our playtest have been great. We've got a lot of content in already. We've got ambitious plans. So it's probably fine because the end of the year, everything slows down anyway. So then we'll be back on schedule. But right now, I think we're a little ahead.
Well, that's awesome. Probably a good feeling to have. But
it's amazing.
Don't get cocky, team. He doesn't mean slow down. All right.
No. Work harder.
Indeed. Well, it's great to have you here, of course. And also joining us, we think this is close to an anniversary. We had Kristina Swanenburg on, I think, episode 2. She is VP of Product, and she's back. Welcome back, Christine.
Thank you. Great to be here.
I keep saying Christine. I mean Kristina when I do that. I don't know why I do that, but just so you know. You can call me Scott with 1 T, and then we're even.
Okay, I'll do it.
It's very good to have you back. You're both here on the day after a massive moment for the team. You guys did a pretty deep dive into a playtest last night. I guess let's start with that. How did it go? Let's start with Greg. Do you feel pretty good? And how long did you guys play?
We played, I think it was scheduled 9 to 11 p.m. Pacific.
Mm-hmm.
And then we went a little longer than that. After the playtest, we have the playtesters fill out a survey, so I want to make sure we capture their feedback, and then we do like a Q&A with Kristina and I were just answering questions that they might have, kind of making them feel valued, which they are, and answering questions that they might have. It's kind of like a nice way to cap off the evening. Mm-hmm. So even though it gets kind of late, it's that's probably the highlight of the night for me.
Is it all hands on deck, like everybody in the company's playing at that point?
A lot of them are watching. We have like the people involved in like the operations. It's like putting on a show,
Mm-hmm.
You're like, we have the secret channel of well, what do we do if there's a crisis or if someone's having trouble logging in? Can somebody help them? Things like that. And then a lot of the rest of the team are just kind of there cheering on. Or we had a couple of no shows, probably for technical reasons. So we'd have members of the team fill in to make sure they could, make their groups and stuff.
Sure. Well, I got a question about this. I'm actually going to read now that I think would be interesting to hear the answer to. Craig J wrote in and says, when they play test the game at this stage, does that mean all group content, some solo, how many hours, etc.? So it's a little bit of a broad question, but is it purely you guys testing Blue Zone content and group dynamics and that sort of thing, or are we even in the space where you can have somebody run off and kill mobs on their own, that sort of thing?
We have a structure to it, which is really around testing the blue zones, because that's our big innovation and the riskiest part of the game. So we're really focused on that. The experience for a playtester is we pre-assign them groups just so we can skip over the part of them trying to find people to play with. Hopefully people they know. A lot of these are friends of the studio, so folks who know other people. They meet in the city, and currently, like, the way you pick your class is we have these little phone booths, I call them outhouses, where you step in and pick what class you want to be, and then the door goes up, and when it comes down, you're a different class. I mean, that's not what we'll ship with, but it's really kind of cute and convenient now. And then they go to different blue zones. They don't know what they're going to get. We don't know what they're going to get. They're all going to end up in a blue zone. They do that for, I don't know, like an hour and a half, Kristina, something like that. Yeah. And then after they finish their blue zone, part of the very flimsy narrative we have is that you need to gather enough resources to build a portal in order to go to the red zone where there's a big boss. So after they do the blue zone groups, they're like groups of 5 or 6. And then they'll go to the red zone where it's more like a raid, where we have 4 or 5 groups coalescing into groups of 20. And then they take down the raid boss in the red zone. And then, it's a big victory celebration. And that's kind of the experience. Oh, wow. About 2 hours right now. We hope to, grow that to be, maybe they do multiple blue zones or something like that. And so within the blue zone, they can separate, they can run around, they can be solo. The blue zones aren't gigantic, so you can find your group again if you get separated, but we don't really have a solo experience right now. Sure, that makes sense. So how many total players do you think you had in there? It may just be an estimate, I don't know, but maybe you know exactly.
55 last night.
55 is pretty good.
Yeah.
That's enough.
We had 20, like 20. Yeah, double. We've doubled from our, October. In September, we had like 30. So we've doubled, and we hope to add maybe 30 more for our next play test. Ooh, that's November's test, yeah? Yeah. Okay. I'm excited. And the crazy thing is, our engineers are so awesome that all of the client server stuff is up and running. Like, that isn't even the risky part now. We can get people into groups. We can get them into servers. The loading times are very low. All of the challenging stuff is mostly around the game design, like what they're doing within the game. So it's pretty crazy that they have, the client server architecture kind of up and running that quickly. Yeah. What a crazy, just from a product making and producing and then eventually shipping perspective, Kristina, that seems like a big advantage that maybe you have over MMO pioneers of 20 years ago, where they didn't have the infrastructure in place. They didn't have a lot of the tools that we have now. As somebody who's, concerned with that part of the business, that must feel pretty good. You can get right on to what matters, and that's making the game, I guess.
Yeah, the level of sophistication that our engineers have given us on how we manage servers and environments, it's like top tier, way more than you'd expect in prototype, which allows us this ability to playtest often and frequently. And now we're talking about what different kinds of playtests can we run. So that flexibility really allows us to take advantage of all the players who want to help us build this game. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Greg, you've talked about that before, but the fact that the tools are in the place they are now just represents maybe just a faster launch, not launch necessarily on a date. We're not telling people that necessarily, but just, getting to the meat and potatoes of this game. Yeah. I remember when we were working on Age of Mythology way back in the day, it was 2 years before we could even get into the engine. It just took the engineers that long to build the engine before we could start. Right. And now there was no question that we're gonna be a client server. We're gonna use Unreal as the client. That allows us to kind of get in and start putting stuff in the game immediately, because you have all these marketplace assets. Unreal comes with
built-in stuff like the concept of a character who can run around and fight and do stuff like that. So that part's been really quick.
Yeah, I played a little of that the remaster of Age of Mythology, and I thought of you. I wanted you to know about that. It's pretty good. It's really good. They made it work with controllers, and I was blown away. I don't know what the thinking was back when you guys were making these RTSs, but somehow that's something also today that doesn't seem like it's as difficult as it used to be, because it's wonderful with a controller.
It's funny because I think about Age of Empires a lot, because that really was the genesis. The random maps from Age of Empires was really the genesis of Blue Zones. I was always a fan of random maps, and like StarCraft, Command and Conquer, the other RTS games at the time didn't use random maps, and I always thought, wow, I feel like they're leaving a lot of cool stuff on the table. So for Ghost, I wanted to let's see if we can make random maps for an MMO.
Oh, that's great insight. I always meant to ask you in previous episodes, what are some of the things that you wanted to do then that you think you can do now? And it seems like these are such disparate genres that would be hard to nail down what it would be. But as someone who appreciated the fact that I could say, I want a random map, I want an archipelago, I want a ton of gold, I want less resource, like all of those choices, and knowing that the gold nodes weren't going to be right where I thought they were, and I couldn't memorize this for multiplayer reasons, like that was a big deal to me. So that makes me, as a gamer, kind of excited to hear. Well, let's ask some other questions here. These playtests are, and it's not strictly just company folks. You've got some people that are associated with you guys, or it's basically a friends and family type arrangement, right? Sorry.
Yeah, literally. Yeah. I think for the first playtest we did, we had one of our developers is in a WoW raiding guild, and basically just invited his raid group because we knew he could kind of corral them, and if we had any problems, he could, he's the raid leader, so they're going to listen to him. And then we brought that group back, and then we let everyone in the studio kind of invite a couple of folks, and so we grew that way, and we had a much more diverse group this time of people that didn't play a lot of MMOs, came from more survival game background. We had people from different countries. It was really cool.
So the next one in November, I'll be attending. I'm very excited about this.
Nice.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll be in there and I'll be able to speak to it directly. And you've talked about some of this, but where do you go from here? Like you've learned what you've learned from the last two. What does November look like? You've mentioned more players, but are there other milestones within the playtest that you can share with people?
I think for November, we have some big focuses that we're trying, and the details of what it exactly makes it in, we're still working out, but we really want to invest in making exploration feel really good. It's something that we've seen good signal on in the September playtest and the one last night of this is fun, players really like it. So we want to invest even more in how we can make exploration feel fun and magical, that moment of oh, I found something, what is this? And just that discovery that makes playing the Blue Zones feel great. So I think that's where we're really focusing in November. There's some other stuff we want to play around with, can we create terrain that's really unique and varied? And there's some big technical problems to solve in that, but that's from a product side where we're trying to shift in November. So I'm excited that you will get to play that one.
Yeah, I'm very excited. So Kristina, let me ask you as kind of a follow-up, when you're in there playing and you're seeing the progress, and especially as you're looking forward to a playtest that is about more exploration, some terrain stuff and all that, there is a little bit of you having to mind's eye some of this, because you guys are early, right? You don't have all the art in, you don't have all the assets in. In fact, very little of that is done. You're using a lot of stuff that's built into the engine that you can use as stand-ins. The outhouses Greg was talking about, that sort of stuff. Just you as a player, how hard is that for you to sort of know that what you're looking at is certainly not the final product, but still put yourself in the mindset that I need to get into this and feel this as a player? How does it feel when I crest this ridge and see this thing? How does it feel when I enter this place with these other people and we're about to, it's all about to kick off? That fascinates me. So tell me about your mindset when you play a playtest like that.
Yeah, so in a playtest, I think the moments that stand out to me the most are when I hear players say things that we tried to create. So, for instance, if we want a player, we had some early challenges around, okay, the players get the main objective to kill this creature, and then they have to look across the map and find the creature. But they didn't have any clues as to how to find the creature. And so we, put our heads together and we're like, okay, well, maybe we can put some props around the creature that are big so you can see them from far away. And that would indicate, like, if it is a fire elemental, put some fiery pillars next to them, right? And see if players connect it. And so they did. And when players connect that, when they're like, hey, I bet it's by those fire pillars, let's go look. That is this really inspiring moment because you're like, okay, our hypothesis was true, at least in this case. And it really validates that the way you're thinking about the game is matching the way players are thinking about the game. And so that gives you a lot of confidence and just validation that you're onto something and keep going that direction, right?
And I assume that informs the artists, informs content designers, informs terrain creation. Like, you guys get that feedback. I mean, it's the point of the playtest, I guess. You get this kind of feedback, and then that trickles down to the individuals / departments, and they know what to do with that information. Are you guys, either of you can answer this, you guys happy with that part of the process, that particular portion of the pipeline?
Yeah, I think the team's super small right now, so it's fairly easy to all get in a room after the playtest and be like, all right, how'd it go? What do we think? What do we want to do next? And that makes it kind of easier to communicate because it is so much smaller. And we have good, I think, team members who are very engaged in trying to make the same game and get us all on the same page in terms of what we're building. So far, I'm very happy with how that's working. And, we haven't made it easiest for ourselves because we're global and fully remote. So there's some hard modes we're engaging in. But I think the team is super passionate about making this game. So that helps a lot.
Andrew in the chat room asked this question. He says, when playtesting, how do you filter the feedback to what is core to the game versus okay to ignore at this point? Is there a concern that the person filtering doesn't bring up something the team would want to hear? I mean, I know a lot of this experience is real time. Greg, I'll throw it to you. How much? I assume there are people typing away also on oh, we got to add this, do this, fix this, tell someone, whatever, while this thing's going on. How would you answer that question? How do you keep what's core and ignore what is obviously stand-in?
I think our whole team worried about this a lot when we first started playtesting, because normally you don't ask people to playtest your game this early on. We thought we were going to have a really long list of okay, don't comment on the art because that's not our art. Don't comment on the combat because that's not far enough along yet. But I felt like our playtesters really kind of understood what it was we were looking for feedback on. And so I don't think we got anything about the art, or no one said, oh, there's no music in yet. Yeah, we're not ready for that. That's not important yet. So I think we did get a lot of feedback on what we were looking for, which was the are blue zones a good addition to the MMO genre? Now, personally, that's because we have a survey and we ask the kind of questions we want to ask. So we do steer them in that direction a little bit.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Kristina, when you're working on this product, someone in the chat had a great question that I think feeds right into probably something you have to oversee. It says probably a little early. Let's see, where is it? I lost it. Oh, here it is. Bruce says, are we too early to see a tentative roadmap for the game's development aspect? How does
roadmap.
how does that come together? Roadmaps seem, I don't know when those get done. I follow a lot of games that are either in early access or sometimes haven't released anything at all, and they kind of have some semblance of a roadmap. But are we too early for that with you guys?
I mean, I think roadmaps, you have them in all phases of development. Everybody does it a little bit differently, right? So we're building out our roadmap for what we might want to tackle in the next phase of development. What are really big, challenging pipelines that we need to get right because they're so important to the game, like classes, right? We want to have a bunch of classes. Classes are very important to get right. They take a lot of work from many different departments across the studio. So let's put that in early. In terms of seeing that full roadmap, the roadmap changes around a lot, and it's mostly when you first build the roadmap, it's a guess. And it's an educated guess, but you are building it with accuracy over time with the team. And so it's less that a roadmap is the source of truth and more that it's a plan that you adjust as you learn.
That makes sense. Let me ask you this. Obviously, there are people who are not in the company playing. When can someone expect to, I don't know how to ask this, because what I'm not saying is, when can the general public join your playtest? That's not what I mean. But as your playtests grow, how are you selecting people to be in? Are they coming to you and saying, hey, Greg, hey, Kristina, hey, everybody, we'd sure like to be in your game? Or are you guys being very selective about who you're letting in?
Right now, it's pretty selective. So they're all, friends and family, or connected to us somehow. But we're going to end this year kind of with a sample of like 100 playtesters or so, maybe a little bit above that. And the plan after that is to scale to thousands. And so we'll have to move beyond the I know this person, so they can come into the playtest. And we're figuring out the logistics and exact details of how we do that. But certainly we want to make sure that we can touch a broad amount of the audience and types of players for MMOs. The thing that I want to just put in everybody's mind is that while we want to scale up from 100 to thousands, there still will be players who probably want to play early and can't, because you can quickly hit that cap. But we're hopeful that we can get many more people in than we have now.
I'm so looking forward to it. I can't wait. It's a whole month.
There's
I gotta
also
wait.
a challenge of we don't want to burn through available playtesters. And it may seem early on like, oh, there's millions of people out there who would playtest. But the reality is you get some folks who play for a few hours and then they're kind of like, okay, this is cool. I've seen it. Thank you. I look forward to the game coming out.
Right.
We're like, but wait, we need you to come back. We need you to test all this other stuff. We need you to test the end game. We had people get to level 8 or 9 in the playtest last night, and that was pretty accelerated. So we want to make sure there's a steady inflow of new players coming in, so that we don't churn through all of our playtesters so quickly, and then we're begging people to come play the game.
Might be a silly.
Which, by the way, I mean, that was my experience even on League and Warcraft. It's not something unique to Ghost.
Oh, for sure. I think even I can tell you from experience that I always get added to the beta playtests for World of Warcraft and various other MMOs, and I always check in. I always get in there and go, all right, how are we looking? And then I get out because I don't want to spoil it for the game's release. So you are kind of talking about a different kind of player here. Not necessarily a non-regular MMO player, but people who want to contribute to the growth of the build. They don't want to just show up, when it's all done and finished, like a lot of players do. So I'm sure that's a bit of a balance, trying to find the right people for that. If you could name something from these playtests, or this one in particular, is there anything that really surprised you? We'll start with Greg. I want to go to Kristina. Was there anything that cropped up? You're like, oh, crap, or oh, great, or whatever your reaction was. Was there anything like that yesterday or last night?
Trying to think. I don't think there was anything, oh crap, just because people were kind of on their best behavior. Faye posted, I think, already on our Twitter account, a player pasted in the entire script of the B movie as their character name.
Okay.
Because we didn't go through the trouble to cap the length of the character name. Probably we would cap it at 16 characters or something like that. That's not the kind of thing you worry about now. And so playtester hey, I'm going to see how long I can make my name. And it turns out you can make it really long. And their name was scrolling all the way across the screen. Yes, that's a bug. It's not a critical bug. We certainly wouldn't ship with it. And I think Brian or someone finally just asked them, would you mind renaming your character? It's a little distracting.
Yeah. So I did a display in the world, the whole full text.
Yep.
That's terrible. I mean, not
I
terrible.
don't think it wrapped, so I think it just went off the edge of the screen, but it was still just their name took up, from the entire left to right of the monitor.
As much as it feels a little trolly and memey, I still think there's value in that. To at least now, at this stage now, you're like, oh yeah, right, we got to have a character limit. We can't just let these people type on and on. That's a small thing, but
yeah. And it's a reminder that right now we have friends, so we can be like, hey, don't do that. Once we start inviting, randos, we're going to have to focus a little bit more on what if someone is disruptive? What if someone jumps into someone else's blue zone and wants to engage in PvP? We're going to have to start putting in those kind of, bumpers around the experience.
Right. Kristina, anything last night or prior to this that just really jumped out at you?
I think last night I was delighted by the amount of players that we call it let them break the rules a bit. And Oh, they had so much fun, and it was really delightful to watch. Just kind of playing around in the blue zone and doing things the unexpected way. So I think like this was one group realized, because we now have leveling. We didn't have that in September. We now have leveling, and they realized they got XP if they fell through a hole in the world and died. So they just kept falling to their deaths. They put a little campfire next to it so they could respawn quickly. Very clever and fine. Like, I don't know that that's a great game experience forever, but fun in the moment. And it's stuff like that it's like, that's really the promise of blue zones, is like they're your part of the world. Do what you want, play how you want, and if you break the rules a little, like you're cheesing a boss somehow, if you have fun, that's the point, right?
Yeah.
Because you're not impacting a bunch of other players. That's kind of what, the beauty of the blue zone design.
Right. Yeah, that's the whole point, right? You're having your own little experience in there, and the rest of the world can go on doing what it does and having their own experiences in their own blue zones. And it is really what makes this thing unique. What makes the show unique is I love hearing these little bits. I know fans will too, but this idea that people learned how to exploit an XP bug where you could fall through the world and get XP is such classic. Like, even live MMOs, they have some weird thing. Well, if you hide behind this rock and shoot this dinosaur 50 times, he'll never die and you'll just keep getting gold from it, or whatever it is. And they, have to patch it out. You guys clearly will not have a hole where people get infinite XP for jumping into it. But hearing that process, I think it's good for us as gamers to know that this isn't just wham, bam, here's a game ready to go day one. Like, it doesn't, it never will work like that. And
here's another good story I just remembered is we try to put a lot of verticality in the maps because that's fun. And then one of the things players can do is build, I don't know what the fiction will be in the final game, but right now they're jump pads and bridges and ladders and things like that. And so over one of the shards was like this huge crystal, which we put there mostly because it looked cool and added a sense of fantasy. Mm-hmm. And so one group decided they were going to build a bridge all the way up to reach this crystal. And they did that. And they got to the crystal, and of course there's nothing there. And that was very disappointing. They're like, oh, we went through all that effort. And again, this is something we knew intuitively, that if you put a mountain in the game and people climb the mountain, they're going to want to find something. If there's a waterfall and they look behind it, they're like, where's my treasure? So that's just a good reminder that if people put the effort to explore, they're going to want to feel rewarded for that. And they're going to stop doing it if they feel like they're not getting rewarded for it.
But you guys you haven't hit anything in these play tests where you went, we got a roadblock that's going to put us back 2 weeks in development or anything like that. You guys, it sounds like you've been, how do I put this? Like, there's going to be bugs, but you're not like, showstopper. Everybody log out. We got to, solve this problem. Maybe those are still in your future, but not yet. It sounds like that must be comforting.
Yeah, we get some every playtest you get a bunch of feedback, and then it's basically going through the feedback and prioritizing it. Like, do we address this now? Do we address it later? And there's always some stuff that you thought like, oh, we can probably address this later, that you might pull forward given how players are responding. Like, for instance, combat, it's nowhere near final state, right? But you still want some things to feel right or players to understand them, and you don't want them to detract from their overall experience. So I think like targeting is a good example here, where it was in a state that was okay. We as a team were like, yeah, that it's fine. We know we have a lot more polished work to do. We'll get to that later. But then in September's playtest, it was clearly not in a good place for players. They were confused by who they were targeting, what target got selected next for them, and so, Ed, our director of UX, did a bunch of work to kind of add clarity to targets, and to the hypothesis being like, it's just not clear who you're targeting right now. And if we added clarity beyond that by like making the health bar more prominent, then players would be less confused about targeting. And I think that worked. I don't think we're like finished on targeting, right? We still had some feedback on targeting from last night. But it's stuff like that where you're like, hey, this is clearly we're getting enough feedback, enough of a signal that this isn't in a place that we should invest a little bit more. Is that a roadblock? No. You always leave some room in the schedule for, like, we know we're going to have emergent work come out of these playtests. How do we fit that back into, the plans that we already have for November's work? And that's just a discussion with the team of like, is it a higher priority to fix this thing that's causing some like negatives in the player experience, or should we continue building out some of the innovations and testing our other hypotheses on exploration and whatnot?
Sure. Are any plans now or in the future playtests? I guess they'd have to be because there isn't one till November, but any plans to stream any of this content? I got a couple of texts about that prior to the show saying, when do I get to see things in action? And to me, it just seems sensible to say, well, we're at such an early stage that it's not ready for that sort of primetime look, but maybe I'm wrong and I don't want to assume things. So, Kristina, I'll ask you, any plans for showing off any of this playtest process to the general public, either in VOD form or live form?
So for now, I think we're sticking with what we share in our milestone blogs, and that is not exactly streaming. It's not happening at the moment. It's not a lot of gameplay. Greg, I don't know if we have any other plans for this year that we want to share. We're thinking about some stuff, but nothing we've committed to.
We are working on a gameplay video that we will share with the world. TBD when we feel like that's ready to launch, but it'll have our stand-in art and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. I would love to get to the point where we let people stream pretty quickly. Again, I don't know if it'll be 2024 or not. There are more risks there because we FPC kind of lose control of the message. Like, all it takes is one person saying, "Oh, gameplay video from this new game looks like poop," and now that's the meme, and we're kind of defending against that. Right. They're not going to come ask us of like, "Hey, why does this look like poop?" "Oh, because you're using all Unreal assets and none of your actual art is in the game yet." Right. We can explain that to playtesters. It's harder to say that to like random person watching TikTok or whatever.
Oh, I remember a few months ago, you guys were not hesitant, but I could tell that there was some trepidation about what you did show with some screenshots, and there was also a bunch of really cool concept art and other stuff you showed during that post. But some of that was like, "Yep, here's the stand-in character model that you pulled from Unreal, and we know this looks like crap." You did a lot of preface stuff to make sure people understood sort of what, this is not anything close to final or even alpha or any of that. So know that going in. But when you start talking about video and a mass consumption model, like, putting it on YouTube and saying, "All right, everybody have a look," that's a bigger level of ignore our paint, ignore the construction, ignore the unfinished walls.
Yeah.
Only focus on, these core concepts or whatever. Telling everybody to do that is one thing. Having them actually do that in today's sort of streamer media market is very different.
Totally. Unless we put like a watermark on every screen that's like, "Work in progress, not shippable art," mm-hmm. We can't guarantee that our message goes along with the video. Yeah. All it takes is a couple of, GIF/GIFs out of context, and then kind of the meme becomes, "Oh, I'm worried about this game." We're like, dude, we're not about to launch. We're just seeking early feedback.
Yeah, and sometimes it's not even real stuff. I remember not too many months back, there was a prominent AAA game. I won't mention it, but there was some footage from a very early build that had leaked or something, and somebody was showing it as if it was launch stuff for that week's launch of the game, and it wasn't. It wasn't even close. But it kind of, at that point, didn't matter. If enough eyeballs believe it, then they just run with it. So I almost worry you guys would have to, like, not just, it couldn't just even be like a bold header at the bottom of every video saying, "This is early, blah, blah, whatever." You're almost going to have half the screen be your face and constantly remind them or something. You know what I mean? Like, you have to almost lean into the fact that this looks like crap. We know it does. That's the point, is we're working on a game, and then you pretty it up and blah, 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 and just always hammer that home so that nobody can take it out of context or do something stupid with it. And I don't know why.
The hope is, we're developing a community right now. We have 60 playtesters. Hopefully soon we'll have a few hundred, and then there will be advocates out there who could be like, "Dude, they said that's none of their art," and it doesn't have to be Kristina and I and Faye out there reinforcing the message. We have a lot of other people who can help carry that.
Yeah. I mean, you guys are already pushing the envelope on this front because nobody else is doing this. Nobody else has a bunch of pre-conversation about what you're doing, in-process conversations. The screens you did show, I don't know, that just seemed daring is a word I would use for it. So maybe the narrative will change because of this, and you guys will be at the forefront of that. I mean, I hope so, because I love the transparency, and I think that our audience does. I know the people in the chat, they talk about it all the time when we're doing the live stream and outside. So I think it's the right thing. Yeah.
We'd much rather share work in progress gameplay video than make some kind of like marketing asset with blur or that isn't, it's just a cinematic. It isn't, yes, it's our world, but it's not the game at all. I feel like players are pretty cynical at this stage, and they would just be like, well, we don't care about this, show us the game. So that's what we're focused on.
They're looking for a weakness, and they like to exploit it. I kind of hate where that culture's at, but I feel like this will help combat it, and I really like that you guys are doing it. We had a lot of chatter in the chat about how long, once you get your gameplay systems where you want them, I assume some of this will happen, parallel work will happen, but it's not like you're going to do all of this with stand-in art, and then suddenly there'll be a day where you go, you know what? We've nailed the gameplay. Bring in the artists. Bring in the animators. Like, it doesn't work that way, obviously. But is there like a sea change moment where you're like, all right, now we go hard to the paint on this stuff? Whereas right now it's a little bit of it's in a holding pattern, I guess. And that may be completely up in the air, dumb take by me as a perception. But I'm curious, like, Kristina, what is that? I use the word pipeline a lot, but what does that pipeline look like in the long run, and how far are you from being able to show us those things as opposed to just gameplay?
Yeah, so we are working right now on what we call a beautiful corner. So it's a part of the game where artists are working hard to express our visual style. And that helps us forever build all the rest of our assets and everything in the game, right? And make sure it has this look that is the right vibe and the right tone, and can do all the gameplay things that we need as well. So we're working on that now. I expect that will, take a couple months for us to finish out and be really happy with. But once we have that, then you can start to say like, oh, okay, well, now we know how flowers need to look in the game and how characters need to look in the game and how the player should look in the game. So now it's not that we can instantly like flip the switch, because sometimes we need content faster than we can make it at the high quality bar. So it will be a little bit of a gradual shift as you start to build out these pipelines. And like I said before, you kind of build the hardest ones first, maybe, right? And then across the game, what you'll see is like different kind of streams, like the props in the game or the creatures in the game or the characters in the game will slowly start to shift over to more and more content being the real ghost content.
So this corner, I love this concept. It's almost, you helped answer a question I hadn't formulated yet. How do you establish essentially a style sheet for a game like this? And I know sometimes a lot of that will have to do who your chief concept artist is, or I don't know, somebody's, Greg coming in and saying, well, here's what I envision. And then, the right technical folks taking that vision and then making it agreeable to everybody. Yes, this matches Greg's vision. But I never really knew how to ask, well, where does that, how do you start? And it sounds like this beautiful corner, to quote you, is a great way to do that. Once that's done though, and you do show that to people, how do I put this? Are you worried that you now have a thing you have to stick to and you can never change it? Do you know what I mean? Like, what if in a year somebody comes in, swoops in the art team and goes, well, we don't really like what he did. And then, you know what I mean? I don't know. I don't know if this is even a thing to worry about right now, but I'm very curious about it, because styles and aesthetics and taste for said aesthetics changes, and gamers can get pretty picky. I know that. Do you think this beautiful corner will set your style sheet for the game, at least for its initial launch going forward?
That's the goal, because art is very expensive to redo. Once you unleash this army of artists making creatures and trees and spell effects and everything, like pivoting that is a lot of throwaway work. So that's why we're being so deliberate about making sure we're confident in the direction before we kind of, call in the army to create it all.
Right.
Because there are a ton of considerations. It's not just what's a style that we like aesthetically. It is, will this style allow our classes and monsters to have all the combat animations we want to make combat interesting? Are we going to have a spell effect system that communicates to players kind of what's going on without overwhelming you when there's 30 players on screen all tossing down fireballs at the same time.
Right.
How do characters pop against the background? You can make the background so detailed that then you kind of lose the characters against that background. All of this kind of has to, our blue zones are randomly generated, so we have to make chunks of terrain that can blend together without a lot of touch-ups at the seams, because there's not an artist doing that touch-up. It all just kind of has to work. So we kind of look at what are all the requirements for an art style, and then we try some things, and we say, oh yeah, that one of the challenges for games made in the Unreal Engine is they can look a little Fortnite-y. It's like, oh yeah, that looks like Fortnite, and we don't want to look like Fortnite. We want to have our own art style.
Sure. I mean, I guess it would really take you out of the moment if I walked into a blue zone and a tree was, clipped into the side of a cliff or something, or a lake was hovering 2 inches above where it should be. I'm sure those technical challenges exist, and you guys are, those are considerations. Here's a off the beaten path question, but when you're playtesting, everybody who's in this playtest, how are they doing that? Are you guys sending out an updated client every time you do a playtest? Are they doing it in some other way? You get some website where you got to download the assets and go. At this stage, it just seems like, well, if you don't have an EXE to run, what are you doing? Have you guys figured that stuff out yet?
Yeah. We're using Steam, which luckily a lot of game developers have used Steam for these purposes for like early testing. So there's a lot of functionality that we kind of get almost for free, right?
Costs a little something, I think, doesn't it?
A little something. Yeah, a little bit.
I remember hearing about
it's
this.
A lot easier than kind of building your own, download or executable. Blech.
Yeah, that sounds like a nightmare. That's the reason I asked. And I didn't realize. I guess that makes sense. I mean, and you'll end up. Steam will be a platform you're on at launch. At least that's the plan, right? Can we say that now? Okay, so it's in the plans. Yep. That's really interesting. All right, well, that tells me what I'll be doing next month. I'll just be using Steam. You guys will send me a link, or you'll give me a code, or I don't know what you'll do, but it should be super easy. That's really exciting. Sorry, that threw me for a minute because I just really wanted to know that, and I forgot where I was going. All right. So let's jump ahead to 2025 a little bit, and you're a number of months of play tests into this thing, and you've increased it. Let's say you've even gotten the play test up to 5,000 people simultaneously doing awesome stuff. Is there some time in the year of 2025? I'm not trying to lock you guys down, but do you see that there's a time in there where you can kind of go full bore on not just roadmaps, not just revealing all your potential future plans, but maybe even picking a zone for release? Like, are we anywhere near that? I guess is my question of saying, yeah, we are hoping to release in spring of 2026 or something like that. Don't quote me, Chad. This is a hypothetical. Kristina, go ahead.
The way we think about it is the phase that we're in right now that we're hoping to wind down really soon is prototype, where we're kind of convincing ourselves that this thesis will work, that like blue zones are actually a good idea, and some of our other focus areas, like the way we're doing combat, that we have enough confidence that we can move forward.
Right.
The next phase is we call pre-production. A lot of the game industry uses similar terminology. And the real pithy way to think of pre-production is you want to make one of everything, because then you know how long it takes to make one of everything. If you want to ship with 10 raid bosses, you make one raid boss in pre-production. You can say, oh, it took us a month to make a raid boss, so clearly it'll take about 10 months to make 10 raid bosses. So we do want to make a zone. We want to make one of everything. We'll make more than one of things like classes and monsters. And then we have a good estimate for, okay, gang, now to finish the game, how much more time do we need in that kind of last phase, which is pretty much the like make a ton of content phase.
And
I'll add to that a little bit. So that's figuring out how you make the game, like the pipelines, all the resources you need, how long it will take, so that you can know how much money you'll spend. There's also in prototype, we're really figuring out the innovations, and that's why we're so focused on Blue Zone. When you shift into pre-production, you build what some people call a vertical slice of the game, or a representative slice of the game, which now isn't just your innovations, it's the whole thing, but a slice of it. So for us, that might look like it's not leveling from 1 to max, but it's 10 of the levels or something, and all of the content that would drive you between, different places on the map, or the city, right? So what we're looking at there is really the player experience of like, hey, now we've got a lot more of the systems of an MMO online. Is this all singing together? Is it creating that wonderful MMO experience that we're all chasing, right? And so I think pre-production becomes a balance of these two things. And hopefully the building one of everything, the building of the pipelines feeds naturally into that vertical slice that you're building, which is helping you gain confidence around the overall thesis and vision of the game, because you're able to test like the full thing, right?
You feel like the vertical slice or the chunk of game will be the starting experience? You probably don't have to, it's too early again for a lot of this, but probably not.
We don't really like to start with the starting experience because it is so hard to build onboarding.
Yeah.
And you want a lot of your systems more complete, and you really want to test it a lot by itself to make sure that it's really shining and players are understanding it. So you kind of, well, our bet right now is we start somewhere in the middle, and then that's kind of our aim, is start somewhere in the middle, and maybe we'll tag on some things that might only be an end game, like similar to the prototype now. There's a raid boss at the end of the Blue Zone experience where you go into the raid zone, like something like that that's hinting at some of the other longer term end game mechanics.
Yeah, because starting it would be like making a tutorial before your game's done, and that wouldn't make any sense, would it? Because even though starting zones aren't necessarily pure tutorial, there's a lot of tutorial in them, and that's where you learn the ins and outs of the game. So that would make sense to me.
There used to be this kind of meme in game development that the best part of any kind of open world level based RPG game is the middle section, because the first section, the developers still don't understand the tools. They don't know what good looks like. The middle section, they hit their stride as awesome. And then the end game, they run out of time and they basically have to like finish real quick. Right. So it's also not very good. So it kind of does this curve of like the best part of the game's the middle.
And
so by building the middle first and then going back and building the first part, hopefully you can avoid that.
Now you said something, you just reminded me something recently on social media about how important MMOs having their plan, at least for Endgame, ready to go at launch is really important. Obviously, there are a ton of examples of games out there that came with a really great starter experience, a pretty decent mid, and then they're like, "Uh-oh, what are we doing here at the end?" Or that end's not ready, or we had to put the end off, or whatever. At this stage, are you feeling confident with that part of the game? Now, obviously, you don't have the details or the bits and pieces that will finally make up Endgame, but is it in the forefront of the goals? Like you're gonna be ready for Endgame or else sort of attitude.
We have to have a good Endgame. Like so many MMOs launch earlier than they should because they have a fun leveling experience. They're like, hey, well, let's go ahead and get out there and we can start generating revenue while we figure out the end game. Players get to the end game much faster than anyone expects, and then they get bored and fall off. So you see a lot of these games, they launch, they get tons and tons of players, and then they crash and never recover. So we have some thoughts about Endgame. It's all on paper right now, but the way we want to handle development is we want players to playtest the end game. We want, before we launch, we want people to be like running around on our raid and having multiple characters at max level. And then we'll know, okay, our end game is good and it's less risky and we don't have that like, oh, everyone ran out of stuff to do problem.
Yeah. You guys have two advantages as far as I'm concerned. One advantage of amazing talent spanning many games over many years with lots of experience in this very field. And that's huge, right? But I also think there's something to be said for, knowing the mistakes of previous games, sometimes knowing them hands-on, like what the mistakes were, and being ready to not make those again. Because you mentioned that initial drop off. We're not talking 2000 when there's like 2 MMOs and hardly anyone knows about them, and competition is scarce. We're now talking about, a many billion-dollar industry just with MMOs on their own. And you need to make the good first impression, maintain the middle impression, and you better be able to do something at the end that makes them want to stay, or else they've got other places to go. And I know that's pressure. You guys probably feel that pressure. I don't know. But it seems like those are two advantages that you have. You have hindsight and you have hands-on. And I think that bodes pretty well. I don't really have a question. I just think it's a It's a
Yeah.
nice place for you guys to
The
be.
thing I'd add there is like this is why we care so much about partnering with players. This is why we're investing so much in playtesting this early. Like it adds complexity to the development cycle to be playtesting this early, but it's worth it because then things like Endgame that are very, very hard to build and make sure everything is working and make sure it's compelling to players and they want to keep coming back for a decade, right? Playtesting is how we gain confidence and we know that we're on the right track. So I think starting that now and being able to do that now rather than we're late in the development cycle, we have 3 months to launch, we need to test Endgame somehow, but we don't have a community, we don't have a playtesting sample, we've never playtested before. Like we won't be choosing those problems, right? We're choosing a slightly different set of problems, which is like we have to playtest super early.
Yeah, no, that's great. Well, I'm excited to be a part of it next month. I know other people are going to be real stoked to hear our impressions when we do our next episode, and hopefully, I think we will have it timed so that it'll be playtest then episode, and then we can really get nitty gritty about where things are at after that one. But I have really enjoyed this episode, Kristina. Having you on is always a pleasure. This makes 2. I hope it's more.
There will be.
I hope so. I know what I wanted to ask you before I say our goodbyes to you, and that is there any class that you've played so far in the little outhouse class changer that you're like, oh, this will be my main when this game is fully playable?
Well, our classes aren't fully our classes yet. So I would say I love our range class because I love the ult that we have. It's just very fun. But I am looking forward to some of the classes we've been concepting. So maybe we can share more on that soon.
Nice. That'll come up soon. Greg, I've never asked you that either. Are you a melee guy or are you a range guy? What do you like?
I tend to heal in MMOs that I play. I end up doing that a lot now as well. I'm really worried about how to make healing fun, and part of why we decided we're just going to have tab targeting is because it's hard to heal without that.
Right.
So I focus on that a lot just to make sure that if you have a game and you don't have anyone who wants to heal, you have a problem.
Do you know how many players are going to be stoked to hear that there's a healer in charge of a game like this? Because they all, I mean, if I hear complaints from anyone during the instance or anything else that I'm doing in World of Warcraft or otherwise, it's that healers are expected to sacrifice themselves constantly for the betterment of others and are sometimes left having the least amount of other cool things to do. Or they're expected to be the best healer ever, and you better be somewhat decent on those DPS charts for what a healer can produce during a raid or whatever. And having somebody at the head of this thing who understands their plight, I think we just made a bunch of people happy hearing that, I hope. So we'll see.
I know how to heal and I know how to tank, and I worked on the plate classes at Blizzard a lot during my tenure there. And I tanked before I joined Blizzard. Once I joined Blizzard, I couldn't tank anymore because my guild was on a different time zone.
Oh.
DPS is my weakest area. Like that's where I really have to rely on other designers to be like, what's fun about this? Or, are we making it work? But fortunately, I mean, I'm not in charge of class design for this game, so I don't have to worry about it, but I do play test it a lot.
Yeah. Well, no pressure as to whoever that is. Well, it's great having you both on, of course. We'll be back next month with another episode, our 13th episode, lucky number 13. And I look forward to it greatly. We'll have that play test under our belt, and we'll have a lot more to say. Thank you for listeners. Thank you, everybody at home. Thank you, chat, for all your great questions. Thanks to Faye being in the chat, answering questions as they've been coming up and that sort of thing. And we can't wait to talk to you guys next time. Make sure you check out the websites. FantasticPixelCastle.com is where you'll find all the information about the game. And if you're looking for podcast stuff, ways to contact us, what have you, you can find that at frogpants.com/street. And that's going to do it for us. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.
This show is part of the Frog Pants Network. Yes. Get more at frogpants.com.
And we did it. Good job, everybody.
That was fun. Thanks.
That was great. Yeah, we got to have you on.
Good questions from chat. I feel bad we couldn't answer them all.
Yeah, I know there was a lot of good stuff in there. I grabbed a few, but there's some of these we want to scrape out and carry forward. It's just going to get more and more. It's like your playtest, honestly, because right now we're at this stage where people are like, "Oh, that's cool. They're making an MMO. I'll check it on that," and then they kind of forget, or whatever, because it's so early. But I'm seeing download numbers grow steadily as you add more players to the playtest. I don't think they're correlated, but it's still kind of fun to watch.
And I mean, hopefully that's what we want. We don't want to like launch huge. We want to slowly kind of organically grow so we know what works and what doesn't. We have time, even with the podcast,
Yeah, exactly. So I'm absolutely loving it. And grats to everybody on 12 episodes, everybody. May our next 12 be just as fruitful. Well, thanks again, both of you. And I'll let you go off and do the things you do to make an amazing game. Thank you both once again. Thank you, Faye. Thank you, everybody. And we are out of here. If you have any questions, send me your thoughts and feelings. There's a web form right there on the website. So go check it out. Thanks. I sounded Canadian there at the out. Anyway, have a fantastic one, you guys. We'll see you soon. Be safe. Be nice. Try and do it all twice. See you next time.